Hi everyone, welcome to our Open Tech panel discussion. My name is Dave Yerster. I am president of the Managed Service Provider Association of America. Today we are joined by a number of experts in their fields, which I'll get to in a minute to allow them to introduce themselves. Before we proceed with this, just our viewers that are out there, if you have any questions for our panelists, please submit your questions through either LinkedIn chat or the comments box in the live stream here, and our panelists will gladly answer them for you. In addition to that, at the conclusion of this discussion, we will be awarding one of our viewers a full access pass to our TBO conference end of October. Yep, end of October. But right now, I would like to introduce our panelists to you. So first, we have Dustin Nichols from Lakeside Insurance. Dustin, how are you?
Yeah, good afternoon. Thank you, Dave. Dustin Nichols, Lakeside Insurance. I've been in the insurance industry for about 12 years now. Our agency specializes in the cyberspace. We lead in with cyber liability and help with other solutions when it comes to mitigating cybersecurity as well.
Thanks, Dustin. And we also have Joseph Kalof. Joseph, how are you?
Hello, Dave. Thank you for having us. Joseph Kalof. I am the president of MPO Solutions. We are a Microsoft partner focused on cloud migrations, system modernization, and custom development.
Thanks, Joe. And Rick from Cogent Growth Partners.
Hi, Dave. Thanks for having us here. Rick Murphy, CEO, founder of Cogent Growth Partners. We're a 14-year-old M&A advisory shop specialized in IT services companies.
Thanks, Rick. And Marlo, how are you?
Hey, I'm Marlo. I'm good, and you? I'm from Bosque IT. I owned and founded Bosque IT a year ago. We're a managed services provider here in the state of New Mexico.
Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us. I suppose everyone that's viewing us today, and I see some questions already coming through, I'm going to kick off with one of the first questions that is quite popular and is a hot topic at the moment. The first question that we have is, with the sudden explosion of AI, how do you see it impacting the business world in that next year, and what are the ethical considerations of AI use? Rick, how do you feel about this whole question?
Well, from our perspective, AI, unless you're actually authoring or creating the software with the intellectual property behind the software, is probably not going to drive value in an MSP, any kind of IT service company from a sale point of view in terms of selling your company or merging with another company. I don't think there's a lot of value there yet, but we are actually using AI in our business to operate our business, and we're seeing a lot of other businesses doing that. So I think as it becomes more and more pervasive, it's just what does that turn into? And how does that get monetized? I think if you start thinking about how that would be monetized across an organization, I think that will change over time. But right now, it's not affecting valuations in any positive or negative way.
Okay. Marlo, you deal with IT companies because that is what you do. Do you see the value in AI with what Rick just said?
Yeah, I mean, it's really been somewhat of an interesting ride and journey here so far with getting AI out there. I mean, it's helped me double check scripting when I'm doing services for customers, and it saves some time there. It's a time saver in that regard, especially if you're using it as like a double checker. I've seen some people get into a pitfall where they've relied on it heavily and kind of hamstrung themselves and had to back out and figure that back out. But it's been okay so far.
Okay, well, that's great. And Joe, so from a Microsoft, you're a Microsoft shop, right? So you deal with Microsoft. How is Microsoft coming about the whole AI discussion?
So, I mean, I fully agree with Rick in the sense that it's the providers and the developers that are monetizing off of this today. You look at somebody like Microsoft, who's come into an agreement with OpenAI. They're now are heavily selling Copilot, which is a phenomenal product. But at the end of the day, the money is flowing to Microsoft and whomever is reselling it. From a it's phenomenal. It's a great product. Whether you're using Microsoft or AWS or any of the other big providers or software vendors out there, Google, whomever, that's where the money is coming in. As a solution provider, as a services provider, the only monetization we see is an increase in productivity for us, as Marlo just suggested, which is double checking our work, getting different ideas, leveraging those engines to become better at what we do. But there's no direct income, if you will, to companies like us that are service providers. It's going to the Microsofts and the Googles and the Amazons of the world and the developers.
Okay. Marlo, so when you say that revenue is going to the main service providers, but Marlo, you're seeing the revenue in companies that are using it. Is that correct?
To a degree, like Joseph said, it's more that time saving and that force multiplication that IT's kind of been promising for decades, right?
Okay.
That's where I'm seeing it, at least.
If I can interject for a second, just to follow on what Joseph and Marlo are saying, I think that as businesses can get better at tracking how those cost savings are resulting from using AI, that is going to add value. It's going to help you make more money as a business owner, because again, trying to use it as a tool to save time, save money, be more effective. Those things are traceable. I mean, those are things you can monitor, and that does become a way of monetizing, using the AI tools. I'm actually looking at a script that I have to work on later this afternoon, right on my other computer.
All right. Well, so that leads me into the follow-on question I had then, Rick, and Dustin, you may be able to answer this, but AI is obviously not going anywhere, right? Everyone's using it. What kind of risk and liability are we exposing ourselves to with a whole AI implementation?
Boy, that is a can of worms that's being dealt with across the world right now, right? You look at the actors and actresses that went on strike, and their AI was getting trained using scripts from them. Who owns that? I think that's going to be a deep rabbit hole for decades to come. So it's no easy answer to that question. But certainly, I think Dustin, in terms of all the things you're doing with insurance and what have you, you might be able to comment on how you see that risk assessment.
Yeah, no, and I agree with you, Rick. It's kind of a loaded question. There's I think it's to be seen on what could happen. The one thing that we're seeing with AI and the insurance side, obviously, there's a lot of benefits and a lot of good things when it comes to AI. But the one thing that we're seeing a lot of is the AI is being utilized in these phishing scams, and so that's what we're seeing a lot of claims come in is by these phishing scams happening, and it's AI that's behind it all, and it's become a good actor on what employees are ending up falling for. So that's one thing that we're seeing a lot of claims come in for.
So then if someone has a phishing scam like you suggested, Dustin, and it breaches a system using AI of some sort, who is responsible for that?
So at the end of the day, it's the end user for clicking on whatever that phishing scam, the email, whatever it may be. But we've partnered with a lot of MSPs as well to make sure that they understand that they could be held responsible as well for maybe not putting the right safeguards in place when it comes to that. So there's two sides to that. I think everybody could be held responsible at the end of the day. It's just who the end user is really the one that's really at fault too.
Joe, I saw you shaking your head there. What were you thinking?
What I was getting ready to say, the funny part, which is kind of unfortunate, is that if we're talking about revenue, if we're talking about revenue from the technology, that's where we see our revenue is from malicious usage of AI versus the benefits of AI. What I was going to refer back, Dustin just said it, right? So we have customers that are coming to us saying, please help us deploy all these new technologies to protect us. thus contributing to our revenue because of AI to combat some of the malicious intent of AI. Unfortunately, right? Because there is a lot of good that AI does. So if what Rick was suggesting is, if you're trying to correlate that income, you could correlate it to the fact that for a company like us to say AI shows up here on the line item that says security products, right? Implementation.
Okay.
But it's not showing up in here where it's improved productivity. Not yet, at least.
Okay. Anyone have a comment to that?
Well, again, I think, just to comment on that, I think what we see, we analyze the financials of a lot, dozens and dozens of different sized MSPs every month. We do, 15 deals and projects every year. So we're looking at companies constantly. So their ability to measure productivity is always interesting. It's a bit of a crapshoot. As companies get better and better at measuring productivity, and I think you could actually use AI for some of that, actually, as a positive. But being able to measure productivity, so you knew how that improvement worked, is going to be something that needs to work into how small businesses, IT businesses run themselves. Right? Make sense?
I think I agree with everyone. I think AI is not going away anytime soon. I think it's, Marlo, you are in a key position to start implementing this. What that looks like for you, I don't know, but I think it is absolutely going to be growing. All right, let's move on to our next question. So we have another question, which is, with the workforce now working remotely more than in previous years, what considerations should company consider when implementing remote conditions? I feel like this question is being asked a lot over the last 2 years, probably. I think what I would like to know from you as our panelists is, what would you deem as effective remote operations, and how do you implement that?
I'll take a stab at it, because it's the
Okay.
big thing in my recent deployments is SASE solutions and Zero Trust. It's really rolling out those solutions that can extend your protections that you get at your office and making those connections from those remote workers to those on-site or even cloud resources easier and more efficient. I actually have done it, and I've locked down, secured a few things where I don't have to come in from certain addresses. So I have to make sure that those software solutions are in place. And that's really where I'm seeing a lot of remote work happening, is with those connector pieces, more so than anything else.
Okay. I see we lost Joe. I'm sure he'll join back in a few minutes. Not a problem. Thanks, Marlo. Justin, from a risk and liability perspective, if I have a company of 100 employees and I allow them to work remotely, what does that do for my insurance liability and the risk overhead?
So huge exposure, right? The more people that we have working from home, the more exposure that we have, and the more hands-on that we need our IT to be. And so, it's a scary situation, and it's one that we were very proactive in during the COVID times, and now we're very proactive with it now, and reaching out to our clients to make sure that they have the procedures in place when it comes to work from home. And if they don't, if they have no procedures set up, then we partner with pros such as our panelists here to make sure that they're set up correct to hopefully mitigate anything from happening.
And then, Rick, from a resource perspective, you deal with a lot of companies and a lot of technology companies as well. What kind of resources are companies pushing into this question?
Well, I think we have been a work from home company, a remote office company since day one. We've never had an office. I've got 11 people in 6 states, and one of the things we've done early on is make sure they're on company equipment. With our company IT company that manages that company equipment, make sure they've got proper bandwidth, that they can do their jobs with, the phone systems and so forth. So all of the equipment and tools that our team uses are actually Cogent company equipment. So they're not doing any BY, bring your own device stuff, except for suppose your mobile phone. But we don't really have them working on their mobile phone. We create a remote work environment for them. We've been avoid customer for many, many years, and I guess we were part of the first wave of that. But, having all that control limits our exposure in terms of what can and can't be hacked. Obviously, we're using Box and other types of cloud services
Sure.
for documents and so forth, and just being able to have that clean in and out. You just take us as a small example, and blow that up to a 50 or 100 person, 200 person, 500 person firm that has work from home. A lot of them just don't have policies like that. They're working on their laptop on a kitchen counter, and there's a lot of exposure there. So they don't try to control that as much as they should, I think. There's the personnel issues and other things like that as well, just in terms of how you manage your people. There's a lot of things you can do about just get up every day, take a shower, put on a good shirt, So things like that are just, people management, so people aren't working in their jammies all day long.
Sure.
I'm a big proponent of that. But we've been very successful. We've grown our company over the years, and we know a lot of companies that in the IT space, we saw, boy, everybody was anti-remote worker right up until COVID, pretty much, until the pandemic hit back in 20. So in 19, I've got clients and customers that they would swear they would never have anybody work from home.
Can I stop you there for 1 second? You said something earlier on I wanted to focus on. I apologize.
Go ahead.
You said deploy systems, cloud systems, SaaS systems like Dropbox. Joe, if a system is deployed and you have these resources, Joe, are you still with us?
Oh, he's frozen.
Oh, I think we lost Joe for a second. My question was, from a cloud solution provider, you're deploying all of these solutions. So, for example, I know some accounting systems have a remote system in an Azure environment or AWS environment, and they're expecting their staff and users to log into that. That comes with its own challenges. Am I correct?
Yeah, it does. It comes with its own challenges when you're deploying resources. Doesn't matter if it's in the cloud or someone else's data center, right? It's all computers someplace, and it all has security that you have to layer in. So it's where people like Joseph and myself come in and help build those ties and those connections from company-owned assets and BYOD assets. I think what you're hitting on is when you have people who have to go connect to those machines in those cloud environments. What are you seeing there? Well, we're seeing a lot of Azure Virtual Desktop solutions come into play where it can cut down on a business owner's cost of not having to buy a super mega mobile workstation. They can go, hey, I can go spend several $100s on a couple laptops or several thousand on a couple laptops, and then spend the rest of that money on those virtual machines. And there's some cost savings and some money management there that they can do once the security's in place.
Okay.
And I'd say following.
Marla, let me throw this at you then, and Dustin, maybe you can jump in here. Is if someone has a remote environment and it's a third party, like Marla, you deal with third parties, right? Mm-hmm. And it's a third party. Dustin, if that third party system is breached, is the client responsible or is the hosting provider responsible? Who's responsible for that?
No, it's going to be the client at the end of the day, because it's their employee, the third party that was utilizing their own system, but it's their employer that's going to be responsible in that situation.
Joe, thanks for coming back on, Joe. I know you had some troubles there. So the question was, who's responsible for a cloud system? And you deal within the Microsoft world. So if you deploy a system and you have clients that are accessing that system, where does the risk and liability fall? Does it fall on you as the hosting provider, or are you expecting your clients to fulfill that security about that system?
It depends on who you ask. At the end of the day, the responsibility is the end clients, obviously. But
okay.
When you are deploying such systems, you have to make it very, very clear to the customer what it is they're getting and where the holes are. So nothing is bulletproof, but you have to communicate that. And there's something very, very important in all of this. At the end of the day, user behavior is never going to go away. You could provide all the systems in the world. If you don't invest in your end users to understand where these holes might exist and how to be on the lookout for them, there's no such thing as a bulletproof system.
Sure.
We deploy this all the time, and we still have to always, it's a repeatable process. They say, I know that's a cliche, security is not necessarily just a product, right? There has to be a service and education associated with that.
I think the education is key. We actually had an employee a week ago click through on something they shouldn't have clicked through on. So yeah, things happen.
Yeah. So that, I suppose that leads me into another question that we have here is a technology phrase that is popular amongst companies, large companies, is tech visibility and resilience. I'm not sure who understands that, and I'm sure there's lots of things to understand. But Rick, you just said that education. What is tech visibility and resilience? What does that mean?
Well, to us, as we look and analyze companies, you see, operating efficiencies variable across all different types of size organizations. A lot of the companies that we deal with are, let's say, the $3 to $6 million sort of revenue run rate IT companies, right?
Sure.
And then they've got a certain kind of clientele that's usually small and medium-sized business, SMB customers, where they've got 10 seats to maybe 50 seats. That's a very common size. And when you look at, the idea of the tech visibility and resiliency, in that customer base versus more of a mid-market type customer where they've got, hundreds of seats and they have a more well-thought internal education program that's usually tied into their HR to some degree, right?
Okay.
Where how they're dealing with their employees and their awareness of what's going on, and they're thinking about their risk assessments and their other insurance liabilities, putting that all in a big picture. It's really, can they react and have a new business application? How do you get that business application to permeate the organization? And use it effectively and not create any holes in security walls and otherwise using their equipment.
So let me switch over to Marla quickly. You said something that I wanted to ask Marla. Marla, you deal with companies of all sizes as an MSP and deploying a lot of solutions, right? Do you see this whole concept of resiliency and tech visibility coming out, or not really?
I kind of have to force the issue with my customers because I'm trying to push myself and my customers to be more in a framework, and I'm adopting CIS as a business owner to make sure that is. And part of it is knowing where all my assets are, where all my data is, how is it being used. And really that's where it comes into is that, and then your business continuity planning. Because you can't have resilience without talking about what happens when, your building's Wi-Fi goes down. Even if, like Rick's working from home, if he's out of Wi-Fi, I'm sure he has his cell phone and he turns his hotspot on and he keeps on trucking and connects to the company resources. So it's really, it becomes a paper exercise first to say, hey, here's where I want to play in, right? And how I need to come up with these things that are going to be the common issues that you would expect to end up happening. Like internet goes out, building's not accessible. What do? Where do you go?
So why, I don't know who knows this answer, but why are smaller companies either not aware of this or not implementing it? I don't know if it's a liability thing. I'm not sure. Does anyone have an opinion on that?
Cost.
Joe?
Yeah, at the end of the day, I compare it to I'm sure Dustin would appreciate that. It's the insurance policy that I will get after the incident versus before the incident, right? It comes up to cost. Resiliency costs money. Redundancy costs money. Business continuity costs money. Doing all of this costs money, and small to medium businesses, technology isn't always that cheap. They don't want to spend that money until they realize that they can't live without that. So unfortunately, what we see, you could preach all day long, but at the end of the day, it's usually an event that convinces a customer to go and do that, as Marlo mentioned, whether it's redundancy in connectivity or redundancy in systems or resiliency across IT.
All right. So then I heard you say, you brought up insurance there. So my correlation to what you just said, Joe, is that if you want to be covered from an insurance perspective, you really want to do this. Is that my understanding, Dustin, that insurance is going to be more adept to covering a company if they have these?
Oh, absolutely. And it's actually getting to the point of if you even want to qualify for an insurance policy, you need to check off all these boxes. It used to be you'd only need to check off 20% of the boxes on an application in order to qualify for a liability policy. Now it's you got to get all this done in order to qualify, and it's only getting worse. It's tougher, I should say, to qualify.
So that leads me into another question that we have is, you say you have to check off all of these boxes, but the question that we have is, the tech talent and skills gap are hurting industries. How do organizations address that? So you say check all these boxes, and if there's no one to check them, how do we do this? What about this whole tech gap issue that we're facing?
I'll go first for a second, just from my perspective. So obviously we do mergers and acquisitions for IT companies.
Okay.
When people say, what do you do for a living? I say, I help IT companies buy other IT companies, right? So when we're doing our due diligence, which is extensive, we do a lot of the grunt work due diligence on behalf of our clients and also for the candidate companies. So you think about, one of the ways to, as one of the sayings is, all the good people are employed, right? So you're looking at, most of these acquisitions are actually talent acquisitions, talent mergers, where you're bringing people together, and because it's hard to find good people out in the universe, it's easier to find them if they're working for another company already. And then when you look at, how you look at the different rosters of employees and the different tech stacks and so forth, how do you put all that together to make a nice, concise merger that's, worth in the sum of its parts, right?
Sure.
So we spend a lot of time doing that, and we see those gaps happen a lot. And operationally, our customers are constantly looking for, what they think is a level 2 technician versus what somebody else thinks is a level 2 technician don't actually jive. And there is a gap there in skills. So there's a lot of training that has to happen. So the companies that are doing a lot of training and letting their people grow through that training, we see that all the time, where you can sort of differentiate between sort of the quality of one company versus the quality of another company.
So then Marlo and Joe, you guys are more on the operational implementation side. If you don't have that resource and you don't have that technical skill to actually implement that, what do you guys do?
I actually have key partnerships where I have other resources and other businesses I can reach out to and say, hey, look, I'm short on, I'll pick on SQL because it's not my forte, right?
Sure.
SQL databases, I'll go find an SQL expert or another, MSP or solutions provider and say, hey, look, I have this wonderful opportunity. Let's get a teaming agreement together and let's go out and tackle it. And that's where I see a lot of, internal IT coming out and coming to co-manage these days, where, I can't get a virtualization expert because, like Joseph said, it's cost. I can't afford to pay that as a business owner, but maybe I can afford to hire somebody for a few hours a month.
Sure. And Joe, from your perspective?
Yeah, that's spot on. I like to call it specialization. As a services company, I don't think unless you're an Accenture, unless you're one of the big guys, right? I don't think you're going to fool anybody into convincing them that you're everything, that you could do everything. And that's where partnerships come in. As considering how fast technology is coming at us, I don't think there's any other option. Is that you specialize in something, you get really good at it, and then you partner with other service companies to fill in what I would like to call portfolio gaps.
Okay, so leading to another question we have is, I'm a small company. I do not have the resources for an internal IT. What partnership should I first be looking at to cover the tech gap?
Call Marlo.
Yeah. Have someone like me come in and do a tech assessment for your organization. I mean, I would say, honestly, securing your email platform and owning your communications and your data there and your data storage is probably the biggest key. So having someone come in to assess it and say, hey, look, here's the gaps. I know people over at Lakeside, like Dustin, are going to say, you got to get this, and this done so that we can ensure you, make sure the email's secure. I mean, February, the DMARC and DKIM changes are coming. So there's a bad dash to get all that taken care of right now. Reaching out to people like Joseph, where you're like, hey, I just dealt with a customer who deals with certain things, and they were still using personal email accounts for the business, and they were 10 employees. They're all at Gmail. So reaching out and getting 365 deployed, it's stuff that, is common sense to a lot of us in the technology world, but people who start the business don't know. They're like, I think I could save a few bucks if I just go with my Yahoo account, right?
Dustin Marlo said that, from a risk and liability perspective, you as an insurance representative, you're going to ask that particular company to mark up all the dots, dot all the T's. Is that something that is done before or after? Where does that happen?
So typically what we do, we'll send out an application to a client and, we'll have them fill it out. And a lot of the times they're like, no, I can't answer any of these questions. So at that point, we'll say either take it to your IT or we'll provide, a couple names to you that would fit your industry and have them help you fill this out. Hey, here's the cost of what it's going to take for you to be eligible for a policy. So that IT person would then help that company fill that application out and also quote them on, hey, here's what it's going to take for you to get to the level of qualification.
Got it. Okay. Great. Thanks for that, guys. Moving on, I have another question here. In the era of increasing cyber threats, risk, and liability, what measures are organizations taking to enhance data security and privacy, and what should companies be doing? Rick, can you give some insight on this?
That's not really my forte, but we look at so many different companies, and you'd actually be surprised that IT companies that actually produce and do IT services aren't always very good at that, which I think is incredible.
What do you mean?
Well, you would think an IT services company would have IT people that could do that for you, and they're not actually doing anything about it in their own organization, using personal email addresses and have family members part of that, having third-party contractors coming in and out of their business without using the business's standards.
Sure.
And they're an IT company; they should know better. So make sure your IT company actually knows IT. Would be my best recommendation.
Okay. Joe, on the Microsoft side and on the Azure platforms, do you see a lot of threats coming through?
Oh, all the time. Microsoft actually is now advertising themselves as, not necessarily advertising themselves, but they are investing in marketing themselves as also a security company. They are investing a lot of money in security products. It's very important. Attacks, just because you're on Microsoft 365 or on Azure, doesn't mean you're bulletproof. You could still do things that are, as Rick mentioned, that are just completely out of whack to expose yourself. These providers aren't providing you a platform that is secure. They're providing you a platform that can be secured. You still have to do the legwork. You still have to build in the processes and follow up on these processes to ensure that your Azure stack and your Microsoft 365 implementation is secure and it's not open to everybody out there.
So a question that comes up quite a lot is, and I think this is a personal question, is which is better, Microsoft Azure or Amazon AWS?
I shouldn't answer that because I'm going to be biased.
Another loaded question.
I'll stay quiet.
Another loaded question. We see more people in the Microsoft stack than the Microsoft ecosystem, but there's still a lot of people also in the the AWS ecosystem. Some are in both ecosystems, and I think that's partly because of the ultimate end client desires to be in one stack or another, based on what their IT people think, their internal people think. We see a lot of companies right now that are fairly well balanced. We don't have too many companies that are just all one and none of the other, or all the other and none of the first. But most of them run a mix.
Joe, I see you have a big grin on your face there.
Well, I mean, obviously, we're always going to say Microsoft is better. We're a Microsoft partner. We do very little AWS work. Plus, if there's a Microsoft person in attendance, I'm not going to rock the boat here. At the end of the day, as we all probably could agree that technology is a little cultish. So you have these people that love Windows and these people that love Mac OS and these people that love Amazon and so on and so forth. At the end of the day, all these platforms are very similar. Most of them provide they're all, I don't want to say copying from each other, right? But they're all chasing each other. It's a race.
Sure.
So which one is better is very subjective. I believe it's Microsoft, but
We're a Microsoft shop, just so you know.
yeah.
Marla, I see you shaking your head there as
Yeah,
well.
I was gonna say in a previous life I used to do IT in a dev shop, and the running joke was you do development in AWS and you did your business in Microsoft.
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty spot on. You'll see I see a lot of dev engineers ending up doing their AWS stuff and then scrambling to figure out how to get it deployed to the Azure services.
So okay, so then let me ask this question. So I understand the AWS Microsoft debate is going to go on for years to come. Dustin, does insurance have a preference, or is there different kind of risk categories versus a Microsoft versus an Azure environment?
Not that we've seen. Yeah, there's really not that preference as to
Okay.
What's being used. Yeah.
All right. Well, that's good to know. So I'm good then.
we do see a lot of different shops running different ways, but they're all IT services companies. A new thing that you've seen at ConnectWise this year, they've been using technology service provider as an acronym. Kind of getting away from IT services provider because it's really technology services provider. So we're starting to endorse that as well.
Okay.
But I think it really kind of depends on what type of ultimate clientele. So if you've got clientele that are professional services companies, accountants and community banking and lawyers and doctors and so forth, they have different standards of security that they need to deal with, HIPAA and what have you, that a chain of mechanic shops don't have that issue, right? So it really kind of comes down to what types of customers that particular company is servicing and how they are, which company is more appropriate for them to handle their services. And we see a lot of that mixed up in the industry.
Okay. So another question that we have here is, I'm planning for the future of my company. What technologies should I be considering for the years to come? That's a tough question. That I think I don't know if I even know the answer to that.
It's
Joe?
pretty broad. I think I'd go back. I'd refer to Marlo. Running a business, I'd run it on Microsoft platforms, right? Obviously, security product. If you're a development shop, yep, I also agree with Marlo. Even though it could be argued Microsoft has good development platforms, but obviously security is top of mind. I don't think that's ever going to go away. It's going to be the cat and mouse game forever. And then business resilience, right? We covered the remote work. We covered the resilience, the continuity. Make sure you're secure. Make sure you obviously, if you're a company that has a lot of remote workers, which I'm assuming a lot of companies need to adjust to that life, you have to build resiliency. And that's the only way you can continue to operate.
Okay. I think we all agree with that. Am I correct in that?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to
We're
one
seeing
more.
that more and more now, where security has become more of a thing. I mean, we've been in business 14 years. 12 years ago, 10 years ago, cybersecurity was a different thing. Was kind of for the big boys.
Sure.
And people that were smaller types of customer sets and even smaller IT companies, they didn't give that much thought. And now there's more people in the space and more, TSPs that are doing cybersecurity too. One of my favorite questions somebody said to me is like, if somebody's offering cybersecurity and they're doing penetration testing, for example, ask them, who does your pen testing? Who pen tests you?
Yeah.
So I just thought it was a really good question.
It is a good question. I agree. So I suppose, Rick, my follow-on question to what your comment just said is, it's actually a question here. 2024 is potentially going to be a difficult year for business and financial growth. How can companies save on costs of their operations while maintaining an effective and reliable service? Dustin, can I ask you to jump in here because you see it from an insurance perspective and what companies need to do versus what they're actually doing. How do you see this affecting the industry?
Yep. So I think that for the most part, it's, I think we go back to affordability is, at the end of the day, what we preach to our clients is, a lot of them will come back and say, well, I can't afford an insurance policy. I can't afford these tech solutions right now. And our pushback on that is always, well, if at the end of the day, if you can't afford this insurance policy, whether it's $1,500, $2,000, this added insurance cost, how are you going to afford a claim once it does happen, a ransom attack once it does happen, any sort of cyber security hack once it does happen? How are you going to be able to afford it at that point? So, yes, is there a financial responsibility up front for this? Yes, but in the long run, it's going to protect you and it's going to save you money down the road.
So, Marlo, if you had to deploy a $5,000 system, what would your rebuttal to Dustin be in that? If you could not afford that, what would you do?
I would have to look and go back to, really going to be the problem of, okay, so I have to deploy a $5,000 system to cover something for an insurance party, or what's the problem that it's there, and how can I work that in there? It really comes down to, and like Dustin said, I wish I saved the infographic years ago. I'd rather pay as a business owner myself the price of suntan lotion than aloe vera lotion, because suntan lotion is cheaper than aloe vera lotion. Sure. Even if you can't afford that $5,000, you may end up having to go to somebody else and say, hey, look, I'm shopping, right? Maybe I can get my premium reduced, but my deductible raised if I can check a couple of these other boxes off. It's really about, doing what you can to get to the point of making sure yourself secure. I mean, going back to the last question you said, when I started my company here, I've taken security as heart and have built that in. And a lot of business owners I'm dealing with didn't even think about that when they started. So, 10 years later, they're going, oh, now I got to bolt security on. It's much more expensive to bolt security on into things. If you can sit down and start to plan it, you can plan those costs more accordingly.
So let me stop you there quickly, Marlo. So again, then it comes to the question of how effective and reliable is the service. So if you have to shop around because of insurance, and now you're looking for a cheaper provider, Joe, does that affect the reliability and effectiveness of operations that people may be looking around?
I mean, potentially. There's one of our biggest customers is a bank, the CEO of a bank, and of all things banks, used to always still tells me, I can't afford free because it gets expensive fast. So, I mean, I think at the end of the day, you get what you pay for. Shopping it around, just like anything else, yes, you could save here and there. Just make sure that you are actually, if you can't afford $5,000, don't go to zero, right? If you can't afford a security product, don't rip out Defender, or don't do that. Maybe scale it back, understanding that you could fill the gaps with some manual work, but going from whatever price you can't afford to free is just, it's just not acceptable in today's environment at all, because it will end up costing you way more than the original $5,000.
Rick, when you deal with some of these companies and the acquisitions, do you see a lot of these measures in place, or are these companies that are going through these acquisitions, are they trying to do the cost-saving methodology and cut back and scale down on their operations?
So it's not like you see in the movies, for sure. Most of the deals we do are trying to put, two companies together to be a better whole company when you get them done, right? So
Okay.
You're looking at consolidation opportunities. Do you have different types of service stacks amongst the two different companies, or maybe it's more than two different companies? Sometimes it's a merger of 3 or 4 companies, and you're looking at picking the best in class in those stacks, and then who's got the thought leadership around that, and also the talent around that knows how to work with that, business application, whatever it might be. How are you specialized? And so it's really making decisions around the ultimate customer set that you're servicing, and what do they need, but also what are you selling them? So you don't have 3 different kinds of backup, PDR, backup and disaster recovery.
Sure.
You have 1 or maybe 2, not 4, right? And so you're making good decisions around that, even just by yourself as a company. If you have multiple things you're selling and trying to be everything to everybody, you don't want to be everything to everybody. Be good
Sure.
at the things you want to be good at. And my advice on that actual question is be good at what you're good at, realize what your strengths are and play to your strengths, and stop trying to be everybody to everybody, because you see that a lot. I sell everything to everybody. I can service everybody with everything, and they have all these tools and all these people. They're not making a lot of money because they're just trying to be too much to too many people.
I think it's a really important factor for all companies. Focus on your strengths and leave the weaknesses out. That's a great point, Rick. Well, everyone, I think we've pretty much run out of time for any additional questions and discussions. Before we do close, I would like to announce that Patrick Smallwood would be the winner of our TIBO attendee. Patrick, please feel free to reach out to me. I'll text you and I'll get hold of you through LinkedIn as well. But you are the winner of our TIBO Conference Award. I want to thank you all, everyone, for joining in. I want to thank our panelists, some difficult questions, and I think some interesting questions as well. This recording will be available on LinkedIn for anyone else. In closing comments, Dustin, do you have any very, very quick closing comments?
No, I mean, at the end of the day, do what you need to do to get any sort of cyber liability policy. Kind of as Joe mentioned, you don't need the Lamborghini of all solutions, and that's when it comes to all tech solutions as well as a cyber liability policy. But if you don't have anything right now, just get something in place. Let's use some small policy and as well as some tech support as well.
Joe, any very quick closing comments?
I think Dustin stole my thunder. Outside of the insurance fact, from a technology perspective, you don't need to go out and spend millions of dollars on security, but get something, start somewhere so you could realize the benefits and so you could, close that gap a little bit.
All right, thanks. And Rick, any closing comments quickly?
I'll come back to my comment I just made a minute ago. Focus, do what you're good at. Focus on what you're good at and get rid of the noise.
All right, great, thanks. And Marlo?
Honestly, document it all. Write it all down is the best advice I can give you. Map it all out.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. That was very, very informative. Thank you very much. For everyone, this would conclude the end of the stream. Thank you very much and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.